Coming up on The Returned.
I was at this gate, this entryway into paradise. I had the choice to either turn right or turn left. I chose to go left, and that is when I.
Hi, and welcome to The Returned. The truth always follows you back. Hi, and welcome to The Returned, a place where we share near-death stories, out-of-body experiences, spiritual awakenings, signs from spirit, and the journeys of healers and light workers from around the world. Today, I'm truly honored to be sitting with Nathan Barkocy. His journey from elite athlete to surviving a devastating accident and returning from a near-death experience is a powerful story of resilience and transformation. Nathan, welcome to The Returned.
Thank you. It is such an honor to be with you today, and I love what you're putting together. I think the most impactful, the most powerful message that we can hear, that anyone can hear, right? Living the day-to-day life is, these stories that you are compiling here on this podcast, because everything that I guess what we all can relate to, is the fact that we all die at some point, right? We all will face death. And so it's incredible to hear all of the stories that you have brought together on this podcast to realize, we need not fear having this on our life that really surrounds us daily. There's so much fear around dying and death and the unknown, and I'm grateful to bring the unknown to a little bit more of a known while we're here on this podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Nathan. Before we get into the actual accident itself, I always like to ground ourselves in who you are back then. And also at that point in your life, did spirituality or religion play any role for you?
Yeah, yeah. So you going back to 2016, which is the year that I was hit by the car. We'll bring it back to, me as a 16-year-old, and I was a nationally ranked competitive cyclist, top 10 in the nation, the state champion of New Mexico, the road race leader of New Mexico. I was breaking records. I still hold the record to be the youngest to ever win the category of the Tour of the Gila that I was competing in. And as a 16-year-old, I was getting offers to go start racing with development teams so that I could go professional, race across the globe, as a nationally renowned competitive cyclist. And that was my vision. That was my goal. That was the path forward for me, right? And I was accomplishing every step necessary to get to that stage, right? To be a internationally renowned competitive cyclist, winning, going to the Olympics, winning the Tour de France. And I was achieving all of those goals, and I was set every single day. I was on my bike, just always pushing myself, always going farther than anyone else. I would always ride the most out of my team, ride the most out of my competitors. I would push myself so hard, days where you get off the bike and you can barely walk because you've pushed yourself so far that you don't have anything left in your system. So that was my passion, right? That was my desire, was to go forward and become, a historic competitive cyclist. And it was happening. But then January 23rd of 2016, I set out on another training ride with my coach and my teammate. And this teammate of mine was my best friend at the time. We were really close. We spent, oh man, blood, sweat, and tears, right? So we were riding together all the time. He and I would be together in the car, just masterminding, right? Getting these ideas together about how we can win races, how we can, grow as a team. And we were having an amazing time as a team, lots of success. it was everything that my coach could have dreamed of, right, to build up this team, and then January 23rd of 2016, we set out for another ride, and we were on a road, that cyclists are, permitted to ride, and also they often do ride, and there was a distracted driver who was going 60 miles an hour, and we were riding together, and he hit me head on. You can see in the photograph of the car that he was driving when he hit me, just the spider web of shattered glass on his windshield, where my body hit the windshield, and that shot me forward about 100 feet, and I sprawled out on the ground, with large, contusions down to the bone on my knee and my back, and an immediate I was immediately unconscious. In fact, I died on the scene. My coach ran over to my side and just he's shaking me. He's like, "Nathan, right? Nathan, are you there?" And I was unresponsive. So the officer who came to the side of the scene reported it as a fatality, and they immediately rushed me to the ICU, wherein I was in a coma for 2 weeks. And then miraculously, I opened my eyes again. And we can get into the recovery. We can get into, of course, the near death experience. But I'm just giving you a quick rundown of,
Mhm.
of how
Mhm.
it all happened. I know you asked a lot about, religion prior to my accident and my
Mhm.
spirituality prior to. So I'll answer that question. The I mean, the core of my life, right? It was that I was raised in a very religious, healthy, spiritual family. So my dad is a deacon with the Catholic Church, and my parents are both very involved with the Catholic Church. So have led youth groups. They have led a lot of different praise and worship sessions, and led a lot of different retreats. And my dad was actually the deacon at the Catholic high school that I went to. And so, talk about that, right? My dad is the deacon. So that's a lot of pressure on me, going to high school. I just want to be a high school boy and have some fun. But my dad's the deacon, so I got to hold myself accountable, right? But that being the case, I definitely my core value, what I was always founded in, was that faith, and that's definitely what brought us through. In consideration to that, I know and I believe and I truly know that the community that my parents had around me while I was recovering is precisely the reason as to why I'm able to be running businesses, I'm able to be writing books, I'm able to be raising and starting my family, in such an effective manner, because I was unconscious in my bed in the ICU, but my parents always had people around me supporting me. And my dad, being a highly influential deacon down in New Mexico, he called in, the bishop and a lot of priests, and they all prayed over me. And there was a lot of support. And I think I would love to dive into a little bit more depth about the power of community and the power of support when you're in that, encounter with death itself, because I know that's exactly what brought me through to where I am today. But that's kind of a high level
Mhm.
overview of the whole experience.
Sounds miraculous, actually. It really does. So, when the accident happened, what do you remember about the moment your body began to shut down? And what was that awareness like during that?
Yeah, great question. I don't remember anything on the physical realm of really what happened. So I know that's what our body does, right? Because it was such a traumatic experience, of course. My brain won't let me remember necessarily what happened. I don't remember the day that I set out on that ride. I don't remember that morning. I don't remember even, multiple days prior, maybe even a week prior. Um, and I absolutely don't remember being hit by the car, and I don't remember, being in the hospital. I don't remember being in the ICU whatsoever, right? Being on life support, having tubes shoved down my throat, helping me breathe. I don't remember any of that. What I do remember, of course, is, this the spiritual realm, right? So the where my soul was at that time, because that's who we are truly, right? And so the in answer to your question, what I really remember, there's multiple just miraculous things that I do remember about that near death experience. So, like I said, I don't remember being hit. I don't remember being put into the ambulance or being in the ICU. What I do remember is being in a place of perfect peace. And a lot of people have asked me about this, and it's so hard to articulate. Yeah, and I'm sure you can say the same thing
Mhm.
yourself, right? With your near
Mhm.
death experience and with all of the
Yes.
near death experiences that you have heard, and of course the people that connected us, they're all mirror each other, right? So it's
Mhm.
all regardless of race, religion, location, history. All of the near death experiences are very similar in the fact that this perfect place of peace and light and joy and belonging is what we experience, right? And for me, this is exactly how I experienced it. Obviously, that I have a very strong foundation in my Catholic faith, and so the way, or I guess the experience that I had, I was in this place of perfect peace. The closest place that I could relate it to on earth is, there's this monastery in the Pecos. It's the Pecos Monastery. It's sort of northeast of Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is where I grew up. And it's in the mountains, and it's the most peaceful place I've ever been to, as living. And so when I was in this place, it was representative of that, right? Because I think that's where my body, right, and my brain had registered a place of perfect peace before. So I guess that's the closest thing we could relate it to.
Mhm.
And while I was in this place, it was a perfect sense of, like I said, belonging, of peace, of joy, of warmth, and when I say peace, I always tell people, we think of peace, as, sitting on a beach somewhere, maybe in Hawaii, sipping on a nice martini, enjoying yourself. It's nothing. Peace, this peace goes so far beyond that. It's almost hard to articulate. So while I was there, I was with 7 angels. And I always tell people it's not angels as in the artistic representation that we always see, angels with the big wings and, the body armor. They were just 7 holy presence, right? So they were just no form, right? Nothing that we can explain as a human being that would make sense to us. But in that time, right, in that experience, there was nothing that didn't make sense about it, and there were 7 holy presences, right? I would say angels. And I in reality, I was afraid to speak with them directly because I didn't want them to take me. That's what I always would say. But there wasn't fear, right? There wasn't fear. There was just my desire and my longing to return back to my body, of course, and continue the journey here on earth. And while I was with them, as I explained to you, with my Catholic upbringing, a prayer that I always relied on, while I was growing up, is the Hail Mary, right? And since I grew up in New Mexico, it's the Dios te salve Maria, so in Spanish. And so I would pray the Dios te salve Maria with those angels over and over and over again. I think that's just because that's where my soul found peace and rest. And so that's why I would continue to, repeat that prayer with those angels. And um it's interesting because there's another I can explain to you, multiple visions that other people encountered during this time as well. Um, but that's at least the primary experience that I had. So I'd love to dive into further, miraculous experiences that we had.
Yeah, I'd like to go a little bit deeper into that. So I'd love to know about your surroundings or anything else that you might have seen, heard, or even felt while you were there. And also if you were given a choice.
Yeah. So this is amazing. This is exactly where I was going. So the choice, I'll answer that first because this is really interesting. Um, so we had I had a decision, it was almost like I was at this gate or this entryway into paradise, if you want to say that. And I had the choice to either turn right or turn left. And I chose to go left, which I believe is my choice to, continue my life here on earth. And that is when I entered into this space with the seven angels, and it was perfect peace. Um, but it obviously was not quote unquote heaven as we believe it to be. So I was in this holy presence of these angels, but it was my choice to turn left as opposed to turning right. Um, which is incredible. So that was my choice, right? That was my decision. And that all came together in another experience, which I mentioned previously. My family had a really dear friend who went to the same high school that I did, and she was very blessed to have experiences with visions and very deep spiritual connection to the divine. And so she had gone to college up in Washington, D.C., and she hadn't spoken with my parents in a long time. But then I believe it was about a week after my accident. So I was still in a coma. And you would, of course, have to ask all the people who were actually conscious at the time about the real details of this. But this is the story I've been told. Um, she called my parents while they were in the hospital. And this is amazing. She called them and she told them, or she asked them, she said, "Does the name John Cuneo mean anything to you all?" And my parents said, "Well, yeah, that's Nathan's great grandfather." And John, my great grandfather, had passed away about 3 or 4 years prior to my accident. And she told my parents, she said, "Okay, well, John wanted me to tell you that Nathan is going to be okay."
That's incredible.
So this is the vision that she had, or the dream that she had. She said that she saw me in the hospital bed, and by my side were my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother, which is fascinating because on Earth, they had a nasty divorce, right? They did not have a great ending to their relationship. But in heaven, right, or in this, afterlife, right, experience, they were both by my side in the hospital bed. And she experienced that and she got to encounter them together. And John, my great grandfather, told her, "Nathan will be okay." And then she was, of course, the vessel that could bring that message to my parents, which is fascinating. There's a lot of course, there's a lot of belief in all of that, right? And belief in the fact that that my friend did hear that message. But I think that's what gave my parents peace while I was in my coma still and while I was unconscious, because
Uh-huh.
they knew that I would be okay. And my mom is a physical therapist, and so she knows a lot about all of the results that I could have experienced as a traumatic brain injury victim. And so I think she could see all of the potential really negative outcomes that could be a result of this, right? And um, what's incredible is when she got to the hospital, she asked the receptionist at the front desk, my son he just got hit by a car and he should be in a coma, he should be here. And the receptionist said, "Oh, we don't have anyone by the name of Nathan that is in our hospital." So immediately she was asking, "Oh no, did he die? Right? Is he still alive? Did they take him?" And luckily, it was just some miscommunication with the receptionist up front. So she eventually did get back to witness, me in a coma, of course, me, unconscious. But um, that's the fear, right? That this is right, death is upon my son, right? That is what she experienced. And my coach had called her, right? And she knew that if my coach called her on a training ride, that probably isn't a good thing. So he had
Oh.
called her because I had actually shot forward on out of my bike and knocked him off of his bike. So he was also in a separate ambulance. He didn't experience a traumatic brain injury, but he did experience some severe lacerations and some damage to his body.
Mhm.
And he called her while he was in the other ambulance and said, "Nathan, we were hit by a car and Nathan's in the other ambulance, right? I'm not sure if he's alive." And so that would just, I mean, that's what my parents rushed to the hospital to experience. And so they obviously encountered a lot of fear and despair and sorrow. But hearing the message from my friend who had witnessed my great-grandfather, being by my side, you know, I think that's what definitely gave them hope, right? And I think hope is something that you have to cling to in this life especially. But when any time you encounter trial, right, hope is what brings us forward, right? Hope is that grace that allows us to persist through the most difficult times, which is definitely the message that I would love to bring to your audience and to the world, right? Is to
Mhm.
never let go of hope, right? Hope is the only
Mhm.
thing the only grace that will allow you to persist through trials like this, whether it be a near death experience, whether it be, a financial struggle, whether it be a emotional trial you're facing, any sort of suffering that you're facing, cling to the hope that God has blessed us with, because that is the grace that will help us move forward.
You are so right. So I just want to walk back a minute and just get this clear. So you were hit by um, a driver, by a car.
Mhm.
You were unconscious and basically deceased on the scene.
Right.
And from there, your body went up to a space that made a choice right away to go right or left.
Yeah.
And you chose left and walked in, and there was the seven angels, and you were singing the song or praying with them. Okay, so from there, was there anything else that happened after that praying with the angels?
So I didn't, you hear a lot of experiences where you can see your body on the operating table or
Mhm.
something like that, right? I I don't recollect anything along those lines. Maybe I did and I forgot about it, but I don't recall, witnessing
Mhm.
my actual body, as if I was a
Okay.
third party. Um, all I really the progression for me, right, was that I experienced this out of, well, this near death experience, right? And I encountered the divine, if we would say that, in that presence with those angels. And then what I recall, is being in that presence, and then as soon as I turned left, right, and we started praying, then I'm back in my body and I'm recovering. My first real memory back on Earth is, of course, being in Craig Hospital, which is the hospital that I was
Mhm.
sent to up in Denver, the Denver area in Colorado. So they put me on a medical flight up there, and my first memory back in my body is waking up in that hospital and, still remembering and realizing that I'm top 10 in the nation, right? But I can't get out of bed on my own, you know? So I have to struggle to go press a button to have a nurse come roll me out of bed and take me to the restroom in the morning. So that's really that's I would say that would be my second death, you know. So I actually did die, um, but I had to completely die to the person who I was beforehand, right? I was on my way to the Olympics, to the Tour de France, to racing internationally, and now I have to be rolled into a wheelchair just to go to the bathroom in the morning, and that would be the, I guess, if we're gonna say that second death, I really had to encounter
Sounds like
the
an identity
right.
death.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, in answer to your question about the experience, the memory that I really have is that's the entirety of it, and I know that, our friend who had those visions of me, I believe she had another encounter, and she was able to witness me with those angels, and she was able to experience me turning left as well. So
Uh-huh.
what's incredible is that when I was able to speak with her after this experience, I didn't necessarily remember her being with me at this time, right? But she actually witnessed that whole encounter that I had with the angels and, choosing to go left. And so she had both visions or dreams, one with me in the hospital bed with my great grandparents, and then the other one of me with the angels and at that same place and
Interesting.
time.
That is
Yeah.
just she's powerfully connected to the divine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Holy. Because that was really nice for her to give your family some type of hope. So when you seen the gate, what did that gate represent to you? And where do you think that gate was leading to? And did you see any bright lights or white light or any type of anything that might resemble that you may have been in the presence of even God?
Yeah, great question. In answer to the bright lights, the answer is yes, of course, so there were definitely, it's as if I was surrounded by that light. So there was right, so there was the option, there was the gate, right, and then the choice to go left or right. Um, and it wasn't as if, one was drawing more light than the other necessarily, but I was surrounded by this light. Now, it's interesting because when you step outside, right, after you listen to this podcast, you can go step outside and you'll be surrounded by light because it's daytime and the sun is shining and you're surrounded by light. But this is entirely different, right?
Mhm.
It's as if the light was the presence of God, right, of the divine, and that I was surrounded by that. It wasn't it's not the light that, right, we experience when we go out on the beach, and we are surrounded by the light during daytime, but the light was with me, and it was in me, and it was around
Of
me,
you.
and it was of me, right, yeah. And that's what, I guess, what drew me to the left was the peace and the understanding that that light was guiding me and that the light was with me, right? And I think that, yeah, that light was that peace that I was describing. It was surrounding me and it was in me and it was with me and it was guiding me to that next
Beautiful.
step, right?
Mhm. That sounds beautiful. So I'm guessing that when you got to that gate, that must have been a holy looking atmosphere. sounds like you felt really safe and you didn't fear. So I'm guessing that that's so if you what do you think? Like you could have went right or left and the gate was a straight ahead, correct? What do you
Yeah.
think would have happened if you wanted to go through the gate? This is just
Yeah.
hypothetical.
Yeah,
It's
hypothetical.
just
That's a
something
great
to think about.
yeah, great question. And I don't really have an answer, I don't know, but obviously we could assume that that would have been,
Beyond the
that would have
gate.
beyond the gate, right? Maybe I should write another book, Beyond the Gate.
I mean, that's something to think about, but that was just a hypothetical question.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to get to a few things. So this experience, as you already said, you did definitely had an identity shift.
Mhm.
Going from a nationally ranked athlete to facing a completely different reality. So how did you see the world after that experience?
Yeah, great question. I saw the value of our time so much differently. Every single day is such a blessing for us to live. And so I knew there were multiple things that I knew I needed to do, right? And I was that the Lord led me to do once I returned back to my body and once I started living once again, on earth. And I knew that one of those things to do was to be a example of course, with my Catholic upbringing, be an example of forgiveness that is mirrored through Christ, right? So Christ was, on the cross, and he said, "Forgive them, Lord; they know not what they do." And I knew in my deepest heart, I knew that I needed to forgive the driver who hit me, and I knew that there would be power behind that forgiveness. And so that is exactly what happened. So of course there was a trial against the driver because it was reported as a fatality, right? So, in the eyes of the law, we did need to go to court to testify in front of the judge, right? And to have his sentencing be decided in court. So I knew, right, that God had put it on my heart to forgive him, and I knew the power that could come from that. So we went to court for his sentencing. And of course, my mom got up and spoke before me, explaining to the judge all of the tragedy that has occurred from the accident and that could potentially occur in the future because this was right after my accident, right after I got home. And so I was still, still very early in my recovery. And then my dad got up and he spoke about, of course, a father potentially losing his son, right, because of the distracted driving of another man, right? There's very little forgiveness in the heart of a father. I can't imagine, if someone did that to one of my boys. So I can imagine the feelings that were in my dad's heart, right? So they presented those messages to the judge, and then I got up in front of the judge and I told her, I said, "Your Honor, I don't know if this is possible, but I do know that, I am still alive. By God's grace, I am still here. And it would do no good for Marlon, the man who hit me, to just go sit in prison or to be retained from presenting this powerful message to an audience." I said, "Your Honor, if this is possible, I would find great purpose in his sentencing to be community service. So he can go serve the community as a result of his actions. And part of that community service, I would be honored if he and I together could go speak to driver's education courses about the dangers of distracted driving."
Oh,
And
wow.
so the judge said, "Nathan, I've been sitting in this bench for however long, 30 years, and I've never heard a case anything like this." But she said, "Absolutely, so, Marlon Austin, your sentencing is to do however many hours of community service. And, you can record those community service hours with Nathan when you together go with him on these speaking engagements to talk about the dangers of distracted driving. So it was incredible
Wow.
because then he and I went forward and we did, of course, schedule multiple speaking engagements, not just with not just with driver's education courses with teenagers, of course, learning how to drive, but also with the board of driver's education in New Mexico. And so, really big stages that we got on, and also very important classrooms that we got into teaching, these teenagers the dangers of distracted driving because so many kids are just lost on their phones now while they're driving. So, it was a powerful message because he was actually an insurance adjuster, which is, interesting that that's what happened, right? He hit me. But what he would do is he would get up and he would show images of different cars that were involved with accidents. So the beginning of the presentation was me in front of the audience, right in front of the students, and I would show them the pictures of me, first place, me getting the gold medal, me being on top of the podium at the Tour of the Gila, and I would say, "This is me as a competitive cyclist," and then I'd flip to the picture of me, dead in the hospital bed, and I would say, "This is what happens when I got hit by a distracted driver, right? And this is what happened when I died." And so they were all floored by my message, right? Seeing the images of me in the hospital bed, with tubes down my throat, helping me breathe, helping me live. And then I would get off the stage and Marlon would get up and he would present the pictures of the cars. He would say, "So this is a car that was involved. The driver was drunk. And so this is what the car would looks like here. This is what a car would look like if someone falls asleep at the wheel. This is what a car looks like when it hits a pedestrian, like a cyclist." And then he said, "This was actually the car that hit Nathan when he was riding." And then he said, "This is the car that I was driving when I hit him."
Wow.
Jaws drop.
Wow. I bet. I
Yeah,
bet.
so
Oh
very,
my
very
goodness.
impactful message, and my goal with that was if I just saved one life, right? Like, if there was one student in those classrooms that we spoke to who decided to not look at their phones while they were driving, and he saved the life of one other cyclist, that is enough, right? I believe because we spoke to so many that we've saved hundreds of lives, and that is my goal, that is my calling, is to be that example of forgiveness to people and to save more lives, especially from distracted driving. But if I even just saved one, that is sufficient, right?
Wow, Nathan. I think that that is so powerful. You were what, 16 years old and you came up with what a that is powerful. Powerful. You've saved probably hundreds of lives. I've got goosebumps. Oh my goodness. Um, Let me ask you, how did you know the Lord was leading you?
That's a good question. So, yeah, I believe that the Lord spoke to me and put it on my heart to forgive the driver, and then the Lord spoke to me and gave me the words to say. Um, I think we all have the ability to hear God, right? Hear the divine speak to us, um, but we don't. Maybe we don't tune in to the right, the right radio station to listen to him, right? The right frequency, and so I know that the Lord put that on my heart and he spoke to me, to do that, and I know that there are many times that the Lord has spoken to me, and I have listened to that, and there are many times when the opposite, right? That's in Outwitting the Devil, Napoleon Hill's book, he talks about this interview with the devil, and the devil, really identifies himself as the negative energy, right? The negative protons or neutrons or whatever the case may be. And obviously that voice, that that energy speaks to us as well. And so I've of course fallen to the temptation to be swayed by, the voice of that snake in the garden, many times, and that leads us down the wrong path. So it's really, really important to be able to understand the different powers, right, of the positive energy and the negative energy, right, wherein one represents God and one represents the devil, as it's written in Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. And I believe that I was able to hear God's calling to forgive the driver and then listen to God's guidance to present that message in the manner of which I did, which would be most impactful for the
That's right.
audience, right? And that's the same passion and that's the same awareness that I have had moving forward, which is why I just wrote this new book with Sharon Lecter, Old Wealth, New Wealth, True Wealth. It really defines the power of our time, right? Because tomorrow is never promised. And I know that God desired me to share this message with the world. And I knew that I had the mission and the passion to be able to deliver these words to your audience, right? To the audience of the world so that they can hear this near death experience, be inspired by it, and then also open their mind to the the truth, and the power of God speaking through our subconscious to to take action in order to, grow his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven.
I'm curious about something. Did you and I know that you're Catholic. What does Catholicism think about a near-death experience and also that you heard God, you know, lead you? How does one see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of miraculous stories, of saints in the Catholic Church that have experienced similar encounters with death, and have heard God's voice as well. It's really incredible. That's what I particularly love about the Catholic Church because we have, just an entire army of saints in heaven that that we believe in, that we can call upon their intercession, and we hear so many. It's the most recorded religion where we really hear the stories of the saints and how their prayers, right, their prayer life, and then the structure of their religious um actions in order to live the gospel in real life. And so I know that the Catholic faith, of course, the Catholic Church is filled with a lot of stories like mine, or even more, right? About how you hear God's voice. I mean, I think especially Saint Maximilian Kolbe, he was, a Catholic priest who was in, I believe it was Auschwitz, yeah, it was Auschwitz, right? So one of the camps in Germany, and he was suffering through that, but continuously he led everyone around him in prayer, right? And he was the light, he was the manifested light in such darkness, right? In Auschwitz, when there was so much suffering, death, pain, he was the light because he led everyone to pray, and he led everyone to find peace even in those darkest moments. And so the Catholic Church, of course, really supports encounters, this near death experience. And I actually spoke with a priest one time about this, and I said to him, "Well, Father, I feel like it's no longer faith for me because I experienced it. I know it's not even believing. I know it's truth. It's not faith for me anymore because it's the truth for me. I actually witnessed it. And he said, "Well, it does take belief, of course, to understand all of this and then to bring it back to your faith, you're right, your Catholic faith." But he said, "This is a private revelation for you. And throughout the Bible, throughout the recorded church history with our saints, there are countless private revelations that people experience, whether it be in prayer, whether it be in near death experiences. There are countless revelations, private revelations of the peace, the joy, the warmth that awaits us, right? If we align ourselves with the truth."
So, would you say that you still hear the voice of him now? or has that kind of gone away for you?
This is a great question as well, and I think you'll like this. My what's so amazing is that the human brain is so interesting. When I was in well, when I first woke up from my coma and I was in the ICU, I didn't speak English. I spoke Spanish. And so it was so interesting. My mom
Wow.
actually, because I was in honor Spanish 2 in high school at the time. So I was conversational in Spanish, right? Definitely not fluent. But regardless, my brain went to speaking Spanish while I was in the ICU. So my mom actually had to call my Spanish teacher in, and she said, "Can you please just translate whatever Nathan is saying?"
Oh
Because of
my
course
goodness.
I was just, I had all the tubes down my throat, and so it was hard to interpret really the words that I was saying, even if I was speaking English, because, my voice, I couldn't really articulate, and I wasn't very conscious regardless. Like I said, I don't remember the ICU whatsoever. So they called my Spanish teacher in to translate for me. And I always wanted to listen to Spanish music, and I was speaking Spanish out of my coma. So how the reason I bring that up in answer to this question is that, I still, I can speak Spanish. I'm conversational with some people, but it's definitely not to the capacity where I was able to. I mean, I was conversing everything in Spanish at that time. So it's interesting that that wavelength of understanding that my brain was on right after my coma, right, put me into speaking Spanish, and also, of course, listening to God's voice and having Him guide me. Now, I do still speak Spanish, when I can, but I need to practice that more. And I do still listen to God and pray to God as much as I can, but I need to do that more. So, in absolute answer to your question, yes, right. We all have, as I was telling you, we all have a connection to the divine and we can all find him. We really need to go into a peaceful place where there's not a lot of distractions. Really, part of my message that I'm bringing to the world right now is that we are surrounded and we're drowning in noise, right? There's so much noise around us all the time, and we have such easy distractions, right? Our phones, they're always on our bodies and they're always a distraction, right? So what you need to do, or what I need to do at least, in order to connect myself back with the divine, is actually put away all of the distractions, drown out the noise, and put yourself in a place where you're ready to hear, well, you're ready to listen, you're ready to put yourself in the mindset to, hear God's direction and hear God's guidance. And I think that's really found, right? You can even see that in the story where, um, you know, I believe it was Jacob who called on God, and he wasn't found in the big fires, he wasn't found in the big winds, he wasn't found in the big storms, but he was found in the peaceful quiet. And I think that's where we need to find God and listen to him. And that's how I'm able to still connect with him. It's not the same, just like my Spanish, I'm not fluent in Spanish anymore, but I do still speak Spanish. So it's the same sort of wavelength that I'm tuning into the
Very
divine, you know?
interesting. Very interesting. Nathan, if I was to ask you, why did you have this experience? Why do you think you had this experience?
That's a really good question. I I think it's an interesting thing to consider. My whole life, I have always been told, "Nathan, you're going to be such a big leader. Nathan, you're going to be, you're gonna do great things. Nathan, you're going big places." Since I was a child, I was always told that, right? That word was spoken to me. And so I always had that feeling, right? I always knew that I wanted to do something big. And then, of course, when I was a competitive cyclist, that big thing was, okay, great. This is my passion. I'm going to be, yes, I'll be great. I'll be an Olympian. I'll be racing in the Tour de France. I'll be across the globe. I'll be an international, prodigy. I'll be just this big competitive cyclist. That was it. But obviously, to be a leader, right? To be that spokesperson, to be the logos, right? The word that is delivered to an audience that really needs leadership and really needs guidance, I wouldn't have been on a bike. So I'm not saying that, God sent the car to knock me off my bike and end my life, but I am saying that it's interesting because we all have a moment in our lives that redirects us. It's really interesting. The book editor who helped me edit my
Mhm.
book, Old Wealth, New Wealth, True Wealth, his name is David Strauss, and he had a similar experience, a near
Mhm.
death experience as well. He was hiking down in New Mexico, and while he was hiking, he was on his own. It was a really hot day, and a rock fell and hit him on the head. So he was unconscious, but then he kind of came to, and he was walking, and he had to drive himself back. He was on his own. No one else was out on the trail. So he had to get back in his car, figure out how to get back to his car, figure out how to drive with blood dripping down his face, blocking his vision. He had to drive to a hospital in a faraway town, and miraculously he made it to a hospital and he was able to recover. But he always says to me, or to his audience especially, right? It didn't have to be a rock, but something would have happened. Maybe a piano would have fallen out of the sky, something random. But we all get hit by the car, right? We all get hit by a rock. And maybe that is a near death experience that we can share with the world. But I think everyone has a turning point. And so, in answer to your question, obviously, God did not. God did not send the car to hit me, right? But God was the right. My guardian angels were the hands that allowed me to land on the ground in a manner that permitted me to continue to live. Well, I mean, past when I died.
Mhm.
And then God was the one who breathed life back into me, right? That power of that holy breath and breathed life back into me. Um, and it's the free will that we're given, right? I had the option to forgive the driver, and I chose to do so. I had the option to speak to these, distracted, or speak to these driver's education courses, which I did. I had the option to write a book that redefines wealth for an entire world that's so confused about wealth right now, and so confused about money, and so confused about the noise that they hear, and I chose to do so. And I know that moving forward, as my personal brand grows, as my impact grows, as I speak to more audiences on stages, the message that is going to be delivered is what God is bringing me to deliver. And I know that I have the ability to do so. And if I am the voice that needs to help people understand that the wealth goes so far beyond just the dollars, right? It goes into the person that we become and the life that allows us to live. Then I will be the voice to help a generation and help a world understand that our time is so valuable, and we need to ensure that we're using our time to build God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, like I said before, and to do God's will and to be better for your community, because that is what we're called to do, right? Increase the community around you, increase the betterment of the society around you, so that we can all rejoice in, the joy and the peace that I was able to experience in my near death experience.
It really sounds like God had bigger plans for you, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, and I think
Mhm.
that's something, right? God has big plans for us all, and I
Yeah.
was able to tune into that. I was able to listen to God tell me, and every decision that I make moving forward, I pray will align with that. And I know that we need to tune into the right voices to tell us that, because, like I said, there's been a lot of times that I've been led astray by the very manipulative voice of that snake in the garden that, manipulated Eve to eat of the fruit, right? But we need to listen and decipher and seek counsel on which voice is the truth and which one will bring us to, take the actions that we need to be the voice and the hands and feet of God.
I love that. Nathan, today you speak about legacy, living with intention. Can you tell us how did your near death experience help shape the way you define a meaningful life?
Yeah, and I think that's number 1. You wake up every day, and that is a miracle. The fact that you're alive, right? The fact that anyone who has ears to hear this podcast can hear this podcast and is alive, that is such a miracle, right? Just the amount of perfect things that have to take place in order to have life and have it more abundantly, it's so miraculous. The fact that you opened your eyes today and you decided to listen to this podcast, I mean, that is such a miracle. And when we're living the day to day, we're put in we have a society that really makes us look over that, right? And doesn't really appreciate that. And it's so easy to seek comfort today, right? To just sit inside and watch your screens all day long because we have the ability to do that in America, and we have the ability to do that and to seek comfort. But a quote that I always go back to, um, JP2, Pope John Paul II, said that the world offers us comfort, but we were not made for comfort. We were made for greatness. That quote is really a quote that has helped me drive forward in everything that I do because it's so easy to seek comfort here, right? It's so easy to find comfort in the day to day life. But if that's all we were meant for, if that's all we were supposed to do is sit on the couch and watch screens all day long and not impact anyone around us, then there would be no purpose in that, right? So there's so much that we can do to increase the value, improve the lifestyles of those around us, right? To serve those around us. And I think we're all called to do that. And um, I think I just got on a soapbox right there and just
Yeah, right?
started
I
talking,
think
but
so. That
did
was
I answer
awesome.
did I
I
answer your
loved
question?
that. Thank you.
Okay.
I really love that quote, actually. But Nathan, there are so many people that will be listening or are listening right now that may be facing their own life challenges or even loss. What would you want them to actually understand about resilience and rising again?
Yeah. I think there's as I was telling you, there's suffering across the world. Every second there is some way to, or some unfortunate form of suffering that we encounter. And I know that we have the option to either drown in the sorrow and the suffering that is surrounding us, or we have the ability to realize that, yes, that is always around us. But if you kind of tune into that frequency of the suffering and the pain and the sorrow, you always can do that. It's always going to be there, right? And it says, right, in the Bible, it tells us, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow can worry about itself, right? There's anxiety in tomorrow already. So just let tomorrow be anxious for itself. So today, while you're living in the present moment right now, you have the option to, instead of drowning in the anxieties or the sufferings that will be there tomorrow, you can realize that you have the option to choose the the joy that can be found in each moment. And it's not happiness, right? Happiness is fleeting and it's not something that we're called to chase necessarily. It's that joy, that there's joy in all things, and finding that joy in your day-to-day life is how you will be able to impact those around you, and bring others to experience the joy that we're all called to experience, especially in this life and the life to come.
After having touched death so closely, do you fear it now?
No,
Mm,
not at
I
all.
didn't think
And
so.
it's interesting because I always tell people that, the in Outwitting the Devil, right, that Napoleon Hill wrote, the devil describes that the two greatest fears he places on mankind's heart are the fear of death and the fear of, financial collapse, right, financial failure. And I think it's such a blessing that God has brought me to this place in life because I'm at the perfect crosshairs between the 2, right? I already died, so I know we have nothing to fear, right? And then I'm able to leverage my time, and since I try to use my time as effectively and as efficiently as I can, my goal is to build multiple streams of income in order to have that freedom of time so that I can do exactly what you are doing, right? Which is increasing your impact in the world and helping other
That's
people
right.
understand the value of our life and how we need to use our every single day to the greatest capacity because
Mm.
tomorrow is never promised, right? Tomorrow, sure, the anxieties of tomorrow will be in tomorrow, but what if tomorrow doesn't come? Let's make those decisions today so that we can act and we can build an abundance of our life and of our impact in the present moment.
Oof, 100%. 100%. Now, Nathan, you've gone on to become an author and a voice of purpose and legacy. Can you share about the work you're doing today, your book, and where people can find it and connect with you?
Yeah, yeah. So my passion, like I told you, since the day that I was hit and the day that I can remember recovery, was that I wanted to write a book to share the message that we shouldn't use our suffering as something, like an anchor that holds us back. We should use it
Mhm.
as fuel to launch us forward. So a little over a year ago, I felt God's call to write the book. Like now is the time to write the book. And I said, okay, great, let's do it. And I've always been inspired by the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is written by Sharon Lechter and Robert Kiyosaki, because that book is really what opened my eyes to financial literacy, and how to create multiple streams of income and use your money to work for you, right? So that you didn't have to sacrifice your time. So I reached out to Sharon on her website and I told her my life story and I told her the vision that I had to move forward. And she responded and said, "This sounds like an incredible opportunity. Let's do it together." So we together wrote this book, Old Wealth, New Wealth, True Wealth, which is really redefining wealth for a younger generation because, we need to understand the value of our time and how we can leverage our time to create more of an impact. Because of all the people that are in my network that have hundreds of millions or billions of dollars and they invest that back into the world, the only thing that we all have the same amount of is time. So you have the same 24 hours that I do. You know, all these billionaires have the same 24 hours that all of my college friends do, right? And so there's a lot of different conception about someone's value or someone's worth due to the amount of dollars that they have or the amount of wealth that they've accumulated. But the real value is in how you used the same 24 hours that those other people did, right? So my passion is to help a younger audience understand the value of their time and really go forward with execution in daily decisions to create more of an impact, allow themselves to build monetary wealth, of course, because that's necessary to create true wealth, which is that freedom of time and a higher impact for your legacy and for your purpose.
Sounds wonderful. Can you tell us where we can get that book and how people can connect with you? Do you have a website?
So anyone can find the book on Amazon. Really, the best place to look is truewealthbook.com. So that's truewealthbook.com. And then my personal website is just my name, Nathan Barkocy, Barkocy, nathanbarkocy.com, and they can access the book there as well. They can reach out to me there. People are booking me on stages there. People can join my True Wealth community that I'm building up for aspiring and proactive entrepreneurs. They can join that on my website. So anyone who's desiring to learn more can go to nathanbarkocy.com, or if you want to buy the book, go to truewealthbook.com, and you'll be opened to a brand new understanding of wealth when you do so.
So, Nathan, everyone that returns always comes back with a truth. What truth did you return with that you think humanity needs to know right now?
This is an amazing question. I think the biggest truth that I would like everyone to understand is, of course, the value of their time, like I've said so many times, but realizing that that's not about just you. It's all community. We are here to improve the lives of all of those around us. My passion is to help people understand financial literacy and how to create an abundance of time and wealth around them so that they can increase the value and the impact of those around them, right? And just it's a spiral effect. And so my truth would be that if you have unforgiveness in your heart, go
Mm,
forgive. It takes a lot of
yes.
it takes a lot of trust in the Lord and trust in that peace and our source of truth to be able to do so. But go forgive, right? And let that go. That's an anchor that's holding you back. Go move forward with your life and forgive. If you have if you are in the midst of suffering, lean into God, right? Lean into the peace that is surrounding you that you aren't aware of, and allow that to help you move forward. And when you do forgive, when you do lean into that peace, when you do realize that all of the decisions you make don't only impact you, but they impact everyone around you, you begin to understand how important your life is to those around you, because you are such a miracle. Everyone who's listening to this podcast is such a miracle just to be alive. So every morning, the truth is that every morning you should celebrate the fact that you can breathe, you can open your eyes, you can live. Everyone is so blessed to be alive. So the truth, of course, would be to impact those around you and allow others to understand the value of their lives because you understand the value of yours.
Oh, that's beautiful. Nathan, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story with such honesty and courage. Your journey is a powerful reminder that even in the most devastating moments can become turning points that awaken purpose, perspective, and a deeper understanding. So, thank you for bringing your truth and your light to the return today.
Thank you for hosting me today. It is such a blessing to be with you, and it's such a blessing to be able to deliver this message to all of your audience and to the world. So I ask, God's blessing over everyone listening to this, and
Thank
I appreciate you having me. And for all of you who are interested in learning more, please go to nathanbarkocy.com, and I encourage you to take the most of your day today, because tomorrow is never promised. So we ought to make the best decisions and the best actions today.
thank you. And to the audience, if Nathan's story speaks to you, please take a moment to reflect on this. Life can change in a single moment, but sometimes those moments are the ones that wake us up to what truly matters and leads us back to ourselves. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep returning to the truth within you.